It is July 16th, 1969.
Good morning. It's T-minus 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 53 seconds and counting in just an hour and a half. If all goes well, Apollo 11 astronauts, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins are to lift off from pad 39A out there on the voyage man always has dreamed about. Next stop for them, the moon.
12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
50 years ago today, 29 years before I was even born, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins sat atop a rocket that was about to be blasted off into space to travel to the moon so they can land on it. Up until this point, there have been several missions to the moon. A lot of unmanned probes and a few manned missions that orbited the moon and then came back to Earth. And these orbital missions were actually in preparation for the moon landing. And in July of 1969, and I'm not just going to say America here, humankind, for the first time, was stepping onto another world.
Okay, 11, we have a picture. We see the Earth right in the center of the screen, over.
Roger, Houston, Apollo 11. Calling in from about 130,000 miles out. And we'll zoom our camera in slowly to get the most magnification we can. Over.
Let's take it back to the 15th century. Leonardo da Vinci was a creative genius. He knew what he was doing, and he had the mind to create these insane inventions. But the world's technology, the Industrial Revolution, was hundreds of years away. There was no way that any of this could happen. But in his drawings, he drew what we now know as flying machines. He dreamt of being able to put humans in the air, mechanically. A couple hundred years pass. It's the 17th century. It's the 1600s. Galileo Galilei has looked up at the moon through a telescope that he created and drew magnificent drawings, detailed drawings of the moon's surface. And this was hundreds of years before even being able to reach it. And as everyone knows today, in 1903, the Wright brothers were actually able to put man into the air. In the coming decades, planes would play a major role in war, and in transportation.
A new standard of air transportation is influencing the social and economic life of a population of 100 million. There's one thing about air travel, it's easy on you. You're as fresh when you arrive as when you start. You're always fit, ready for the day's work. Any seasoned air traveler will tell you that.
And as that technology was growing, people started to have an interest in rockets and space. Lots of research and testing had been going on during the 1950s, and during the later half of the 1950s, both the Soviet Union and America were floating around Earth and sending stuff to the moon. America wanted to do something much greater, and so in 1961, JFK gave that famous speech and announced that he wanted to send humans to the moon by the end of the decade. This was happening just 5 to 6 decades after the first flight ever. The moon landing happened only 29 years before I was born in 1998. It's now 2019, and we're going back to the moon.
What many people don't know is that Apollo had a twin.
She was a woman named Artemis,
goddess of the moon.
We are returning to the moon
as a new generation of explorers.
This time to stay
and to prepare
to achieve humanity's next giant leap of sending the first human missions to Mars.
We are laying the groundwork for a spacefaring species that we might have the ability to become.
Our deep space mission isn't much different. We're going to stumble, make mistakes, I'm sure more than a few before we find our footing. But we're going to learn from those mistakes. That's what being human is all about.
The Apollo missions, although leading in a few deaths,
America's first 3 Apollo astronauts were trapped and killed by a flash fire that swept their moonship early tonight during a launch pad test at Cape Kennedy in Florida. Virgil Gus Grissom, 40 years old, one of the original Mercury astronauts, the first American astronaut to go twice into space. Edward White, 36 years old, the first American to walk into space. And rookie astronaut Roger Chaffee, 31 years old, training for his first space flight.
And lots of blood, sweat, and tears, and a lot of fear in not knowing what could happen.
Risk is our business. That's what the Starship is all about.
All of it created this idea that we have the ability to work together, not as countries, but as a human race, to explore, to adventure. After doing a lot of reading and watching today, I've realized that humans are capable of the unimaginable. We are able to make science fiction a reality. We have the ability within us to unlock the secrets of the universe, to unlock the secrets of why we are alive here at all. And I hope this inspires you to look up at the stars, to look up at the moon a little differently. I am leaving a ton of links in the description below that you guys can check out and explore, because this is so interesting that humans were able to develop a technology to allow them to fly, and in the same century, just a few decades later, orbit the Earth, and then actually orbit the moon, and then land on it. And then in the same century, have multiple space stations that orbited the planet.
Man has visited the moon and sent his spacecraft to Venus and Mars and to Jupiter. Now preparations are being made for further manned exploration. The Skylab, 3 astronauts in an orbiting laboratory space station, testing man's ability to survive long space travel.
And one that is currently still in orbit that we've had many missions to. All of this happened in a century. My grandparents, 3 of them who are still alive, were born before anything was sent to space. And now there are thousands of satellites around. They are still alive. So in one human lifetime, we have gone from being stuck on Earth to going to the moon to having 2 crafts that are on their way out of our solar system. What can we achieve in the following decades? What can we achieve in the following centuries? What will humans be doing in space in a few thousand years from now? If we are still alive, of course. I highly recommend that this week you really think about what humans have achieved and the daring feats that humans have accomplished. NASA wasn't technically sure if Buzz and Neil could link back up with the orbiter.
But if they couldn't, and it was a good risk that they couldn't, then they would have to be abandoned on the moon, left to die there. And mission control would then have to use their euphemism, close down communication. And the men would have to either starve to death or commit suicide.
The following is dated July 18th, 1969, just 2 days before the landing, while they were traveling to the moon. Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace. These brave men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, know that there is no hope for their recovery, but they also know that there is hope for mankind in their sacrifice. In ancient days, men looked at stars and saw their heroes in the constellations. In modern times, we do much the same, but our heroes are of epic men of flesh and blood. For every human being who looks up to the moon in the nights to come will know that there is some corner of another world that is forever mankind. I hope that this video kind of shines a new light on this stuff for you. It's not just boring human history. This is who we are. This is what we are. Humans are explorers. We are adventurers. And now that we've kind of discovered most of the Earth and continuing to explore and uncover new species, we must venture into the stars. We must venture into the unknown. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And let's enjoy the next few years as we prepare to go back. And I will be seeing you all very, very soon with some amazing summer vlogs and a little bit of new merch that's coming very soon, and all the information will be unveiled. Hats off to the 50th anniversary of humans landing on the moon.
There he is. There's a foot coming down the step.
I'm at the foot of the ladder.
Armstrong is on the moon. Neil Armstrong, 38-year-old American, standing on the surface of the moon on this July 20th, 1969.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, for thousands of years now, it's been man's dream to walk on the moon. Right now, after seeing it happen, knowing that it happened, it still seems like a dream.
Go ahead, Mr. President. This is Houston out.
Hello, Neil and Buzz. This certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made from the White House.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honor for us to be able to participate here today.
We think that you've done a magnificent job up there today. Over.
Thank you very much. It's been a long day.
Man has landed there, and man has taken his first steps there. I wonder just what there is to add to that.